thank you for approving to come to our lecture series here at CSIS, and we are very grateful that we have a good friend of CSIS, a long-time friend of CSIS, Dr. Victor Sumsky. He's been coming to Indonesia maybe since I wasn't born yet. And then he speaks very fluent Bahasa. I hope you are still speaking Bahasa Indonesia. And so then if needed in the discussion, especially for my fellow Indonesians, if you are more comfortable in asking questions in Bahasa, Dr. Sumsky certainly can entertain the questions in Bahasa. And he's now the director of the ASEAN Center at Moscow State Institute of International Relations, MGIMO University. And he's here for a meeting between ASEAN and Russia partnership, of which now we are centering our discussion on how to build a better relationship between ASEAN and Russia. The title is In a Troubled World. Maybe Dr. Sumsky can also entertain us with his idea of what kind of troubled world that we are having right now. And then, of course, ASEAN and Russia has been a long-time strategic partner. Russia remains one of the major powers that can and still play a very important role in geopolitics, in world peace, and also in the international and multilateral organizations, of which Indonesia is also part of. And as we are all well aware, Indonesia is now non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. How it might play out in this context of troubled world and cooperation between Indonesia and Russia, maybe it will be touched upon by Dr. Sumsky as well, but I let him having his presentation based on this very important topic on how we can move forward with ASEAN and Russia strategic partnership. We have until 4 p.m. So I'll give Dr. Sumsky about 15 to 20 minutes presentation, so we will have enough discussions among the participants and so that we can deepen our understanding on the subject. Without further ado, I'd like to move over the microphone to Dr. Sumsky.
Thank you so much, Pak Phillips. When I was a student of Bahasa Indonesia, our teachers at that time were full of Indonesian proverbs. And I was a bad student in the sense that I did not remember that many of them. But the one I remember still, I would like to tell you. This is the famous saying, "Ibarat menemui buah si malakama." You know what it is. It is about a person who finds in the jungle a non-existent mythical fruit, which is called simalakama. And the important thing about simalakama is that if you find it and you pick it up and you eat it, your father dies. If you pick it up, if you see it and you do not pick it up and you do not eat it, your mother dies. So basically it is an image of a situation in which you never have to get, in which out of which there is no good way out. I say it all now to you to give you an idea of how troubled I think this world is now. It is in many ways, this is a situation in which none of the major players wanted to be, but they got into it, and nobody is happy today with this situation. And I would say, I think I can give you several examples, but later on in the lecture, where, you know, you may want to get back to from where we came here, and you cannot. You want to go ahead somewhere, and you cannot go there. without some very serious risks and sacrifices. So this is as far as the troubled world is concerned, and of course we can be less philosophical and more down to earth when we discuss the details. I think we need this introduction just to be always aware during the rest of my talk. By the way, this is not a lecture. This is rather what you call in Indonesian ceramah. This is a talk. About my starting point is why, in a moment like this, ASEAN and Russia decided to go into a strategic partnership. What does it tell you about the way they view each other, actually, about their vision for the future? Now, again, getting down to earth, ASEAN and Russia are counting the period of their dialogue partnership from the year 1996, when Russia was officially elevated to the level of a dialogue partner. Strategic partnership is a very rare a very recent development. It started in November last year, when during the third ASEAN-Russia summit in Singapore, Russia was elevated to the level of a strategic partner. And the first part of my presentation, and maybe I actually plan to talk a little longer, but maybe we can save some other themes for the question and answer period, and I will basically try to speculate a little about why exactly now, and how do we decipher the wish of ASEAN to grant this rank of partnership to Russia now. Let me start by saying that by November last year, several important things happened as far as other dialogue partners of ASEAN are concerned, specifically the United States. The United States came forward with the document known as National Defense Strategy. Then later in the year, National Security Strategy followed, and already in the process of preparation was the legal act known as Asia Reassurance Act. All these documents are important because they were the ones in which Indo-Pacific was brought into the, not even into the political discourse, but into the official American position as the concept on which it is now relying, rather than Asia-Pacific. And closely linked to that theme was the identification of China and Russia as America's adversaries. So you remember this, and then you try to figure out what does it mean when ASEAN, which has dialogue partnerships with the United States and with the European Union, who have actually gone into what I would call the orgy of sanctions. So far, just for your knowledge, if you don't know it, there were more than 80 rounds of sanctions against Russia undertaken by United States and the European Union. Illegal sanctions, because they are not conducted in accordance with UN procedures, unilateral sanctions, 60 of them by the United States, 20 of them by the European Union. A simple question. Are these powerful players, United States, European Union, whom we can call the West, can be pleased by ASEAN, willing to display its trust and willingness to maintain and to upgrade relationship with Russia through the introduction of strategic partnership? Obviously not. Why, in spite of that, ASEAN still wants to do it? I think it's an interesting question. Ambassador Alexander Ivanov, whom you certainly know, and who is a familiar figure on the diplomatic circuit of Jakarta before becoming the permanent representative of Russia to ASEAN, he served for many years as the ambassador to Indonesia, had written several articles after the promotion of dialogue partnership to strategic partnership, dedicated to this topic. And if you look at them, you will find many reasons why, and they include both political matters and economic cooperation. But when you start to analyze, and all these things are important, and I basically agree with his general line of thinking. But nevertheless, when you start to try to analyze it a little deeper, you ask, well, ASEAN is very economically and pragmatically minded, and even though, for instance, trade turnover between Russia and ASEAN has risen by 30% in 2017, it is still not high compared to what some other dialogue partners have. So from that point of view, well, for instance, in 2005, when Russia was applying for membership in the East Asian Summit, it was initially denied that claim under the pretext that the economic relations are not really substantial. This could have been said now, but it was not said. And I think this alone gives you an idea that that ASEAN operated on political grounds here, and also, well, this I'm saying this based on anecdotal evidence and not on anything like reliable information which can be checked through any written sources. But throughout the last year, I had a feeling that as long as the negotiations between Russia and ASEAN on issues related to the conduct of the third ASEAN-Russia summit were going at the middle level, operational level of diplomats, there was not so much progress. But once it got to the top level of the to the top negotiating level, there was this result. Actually, I was surprised when it was announced in Singapore that it is now strategic partnership. Also, you should know that the intention to proceed along the road to full strategic partnership was expressed 3 years ago in Sochi during the commemorative summit of Russia and ASEAN dedicated to the 20th anniversary of their dialogue partnership. At that time, it was decided that they are simply expressing their intention to get to the level of strategic partnership, but they are not yet there. And from the documents which were published at that time, you could have an impression that it will take some time before it happens. It took just 2 years to get from point A to point B. And again, you have this question, why so quickly? And I would say that, interestingly, the period from 2016 to 2018 is exactly the period of what I just called the orgy of sanctions. And you almost have the feeling that the movement towards strategic partnership was quickened in proportion to the pressure to which Russia was subjected by those whom President Putin still cordially calls our Western partners. How do we explain all that? I would say that yes, we have a friendly relationship with ASEAN, and by the way, today during the meeting of the joint ASEAN-Russia Joint Cooperation Committee, which comes into sessions once a year at the ASEAN-SEC to evaluate the progress made during the previous year, the atmosphere was very friendly, and it was you could feel on the ASEAN side that there is probably a greater degree of engagement and interest in developing the relationship than I would say there was before. Although it was never missing, but it was a somewhat different story compared to what used to be before. In spite of this friendly atmosphere, ASEAN do not look to me, and it's not just ASEAN, it's any player in international relations who does something for granted or just because it wants to please somebody. Things like this are done in the realm of international relations when there is some real interest. National interest, or if you wish, regional interest. So what this interest is about? I would say that as far as I can see, the key words in ASEAN discourse about ASEAN itself are inclusiveness and centrality. And there is an intimate relationship between these two things. Inclusiveness means, well, I understand that I do not need to explain it to you specifically, but let's go through it. Inclusiveness is about bringing everybody to the cooperation table who has anything to do with interactions in that part of the world to which ASEAN belongs, irrespective of ideologies and all sorts of political differences, levels of development, and so on and so forth. In fact, this is done, apart from many other things, to put ASEAN itself into a position of control over the different interests which cross on this in this area, and to be, if you wish, a regional manager, to acquire in this way a degree of autonomy which it may not have otherwise if the circle of its partners was just limited, and there was a danger of becoming dependent on just one or two or three of them. So some would say the bigger, the more, the merrier, the better. Centrality also has to do with inclusiveness, because I think in the way I described it to you now, it is a function of inclusiveness. Now let's imagine a situation in which ASEAN, being a little more submissive than it actually is, decides to play in the present international setup with the Americans, with the West, to play according to their rules, and if not join the sanctions orgy, then at least not do something that will be clearly displeasing to them, and starts to estrange itself from Russia. It loses both inclusiveness and centrality. And it loses centrality because it loses that degree of independence and autonomy, which allows it to stand at the center. So, and eventually it is in danger of facing maybe old partners, but the partners which are clearly stronger than it is, and which it cannot balance anymore by other participants, like Russia in this case. So the act of elevating Russia may be a little ahead of the achievements and mutual gravitation, which are typical of fully developed strategic partnership, is a way to preempt the loss of inclusivity and centrality. And from that point of view, it looks to me like a very calculated move, not anything sentimental, but something which is aimed at preserving the achievements of the previous political era, the era into which, for good or for bad, we are not going to return. To be able to secure for itself a position in the years to come, which will be more or less comfortable for it, and which will give it some kind of new life in this changed circumstances. Have I spoken for 15 minutes?
5 more minutes.
Five more minutes, okay. So let's congratulate Russia and ASEAN for doing something that is in their both mutual interests, and for creating a good playing ground for proceeding further. The problem, however, is that, and here I'm getting back to the beginning of my presentation, the world is now troubled to such an extent that, paradoxically and sadly, unless some special effort is taken and extraordinary political will is displayed, there may not be enough qualitative change in the observable future. In other words, we will move in a step-by-step evolutionary fashion in a situation in which the environment is changing by leaps and bounds. So here you have to just do an analysis of this situation, which on the one hand will show you how bad and impossible it is, and it is bad and impossible, but on the other hand will at least provoke you into thinking what in conditions like this can be realistically done to let the relationship acquire some new quality. I am about to start another lecture, and from that point of view, I think for the initial conversation, and let me tell you frankly, I'm here not so much to talk, but to listen to your questions and to think and to try to respond. Let's start doing this, and I will tell you the rest of the story. I will try to incorporate it into my answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sumsky. I think it's very interesting the way you frame the question of why now, and what makes ASEAN decide to elevate the strategic the partnership with Russia into the strategic partnership as of last year, in the era of, according to Dr. Sumsky, when Russia is experiencing various sanctions from various corners of the world, but the ASEAN decides to operate consistently on the principle of inclusiveness and autonomy, and that's to me is very interesting to be explored in the Q&A. But now I let the audience, if you have a response, questions, or your own ideas about the topic that we are discussing today, I open for the first round of 3 persons, one on the right and one on the left. Is there anyone in the middle? No middle way? Not yet. Okay, let us start with the first question. Silakan, Pak.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting to meet you again. Maybe you
Microphone, Pak.
I'm Iskandar Hadrianto. I'm not representing government entity or institution, but from the syndicate of national interest. So talking about the relationship between the ASEAN and Russian Federation, I think there are some modalities that I want to ask you to weigh or to give opinion on the key issue. First is shared responsibility, promoting peace, security, and stability, prosperity, and enhancing the economic cooperation between ASEAN and the Russian Federation. Amid there are still some hanging cloud. I do not specifically say that a remnant of ASEAN culture to look into Russia. But the world is changing, and we have the modality. For instance, in the bilateral relation, we have also transnational crime cooperation, etc., that you can explore further in the ASEAN context. And second thing, it's about the enhancing economic relationship. And before I forget, thank you for the strategic partnership that now will be running into such kind of reality. How do you foresee? Because I'm talking now ASEAN. We are inclusive, so we are not having any problem with Russia. And there is one thing that I remember, I think it's from Sochi, that we are going to enact such kind of a memorandum of understanding or maybe agreement on the free trade between ASEAN and Russia. How do you foresee that amidst that the uncertainty or the situation that's now you're looking? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Iskandar. Next, please identify yourself.
Thank you very much. Beberapa salawat, selamat datang di Jakarta, Bapak Sumsky. My name is Ilham. I'm from the University of Indonesia. Maybe I already met like in 2 occasions with Pak Sumsky, like the last one in September when I was at the participant of the ASEAN-Russia competition essay. So maybe I want to ask like just 3 questions, maybe because like the first one, how does...
Excuse me, could you limit to 2?
2, okay, just 2, okay. Okay, just 2, but it's very important. First, like, how does Russia and ASEAN view each other in terms, maybe in terms of the relation in regarding of the, maybe all of this theory, economic, political, and social cultural. And the second one is, I want to ask about how does the chances of enhancing cooperation of ASEAN-Russia regarding of the terms of social cultural partnership, because like as you already told, like we suddenly become strategic partnership, like in terms of the political, we already Indonesia and Russia is already in the United Nations Security Council, but in terms of the social cultural, how do you see how to enhance this kind of cooperation? Thank you.
Thank you. I think 2 already questions. Yes. Please.
Your question about free trade area, but let me respond in a broader way about economic interaction in general. Invariably during Russia-ASEAN discussions you come across the subject that politically the relationship is very good, but it still needs a much stronger economic base. So this issue is permanently there. And I would say that I think if you see the dynamics of these relations, economic relations, you invariably will note that it is improving, but it is improving slowly. Is free trade the way out? In some ways, yes, but we should remember one very important thing about free trade arrangements. They allow the already existing economic potential to come to the fore, to become more developed, but they do not create new economic potential. So from that point of view, this is something we may want to do, especially based on the assumption that this is the arrangements to which ASEAN is well accustomed and which it cultivates with its other dialogue partners. We have made the first step already, which is the free trade area with Vietnam. And by the way, it is not just the free trade area between Russia and Vietnam. It is a free trade area between Eurasian Economic Union and Vietnam. Just a while ago, the Vietnamese embassy in Moscow had a conference on the results of the first 2 years of operation of this free trade area. And in some ways, they are better than could have been anticipated. The trade turnover, it's a preliminary calculation, but it's there. For the last year is the biggest Russia and Vietnam ever had after the breakup of the Soviet Union. It is exceeding $6 billion. Now, in the pipeline are documents related to free trade area agreements with Singapore and some other ASEAN countries, but Singapore, I think, is first in line. So this process will go on, and I think there will be, again, it's not just Singapore-Russia, it is Singapore and Eurasian Economic Union. The problem is that Eurasian Economic Union does have supranational element, which entitle us to, which makes it obligatory for us to go into these negotiations along with our Eurasian partners. And at least some research on the possibility of going into the Eurasian Economic Union ASEAN free trade area is being done already. Let me also tell you this. I think this is something that has not been that should not be forgotten in this conversation. Russia is not coming unprepared into the role of strategic partner of ASEAN, in a sense that it has produced, I think, a very important concept of developing a trilateral relationship between the Eurasian Economic Union, of which, by the way, is also represented here not just by the ambassador of Russia, Her Excellency Lyudmila Vorobyova, but also by the ambassador of Belarus, another member of the Eurasian Economic Union. So a trilateral construct, which is Eurasian Economic Union, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and ASEAN. You know that, and I do not think this is just something artificial and something that can never materialize in a real stronger form. if you remember at least that in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, you now have not just Russia and China as ASEAN dialogue and trading partners, but also India. So there is already there are already some important links within this structure, and I would say that here I am jumping quickly into something that I find very important. We must try to conceive, if we want to make quicker progress in economic relations, something that has not been done before, we must together, the members of all these elements of the construction, ASEAN, Eurasian Economic Union, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, we must go into consultations about a mega project which will involve all these countries and which will respond to some crucial interests of each and every of them. I would not. I can do a more elaborate explanation about what it may be, but let's leave it for another occasion. I just want to say that if we want to quickly change the situation for the better, we must do something unorthodox and something that we have not done before. I think that the opportunities are there, and I have one particular proposal about what kind of project that might be, but there may be much more if we start to thoroughly and purposefully explore this form through consistent consultations. This is as much as I would like to say now about the economic relationship, but let me say this. In my personal view, if we do not do this, we may wait for a long time before strategic partnership emerges in any real form. Now, how Russia and ASEAN see each other. I can tell you my own. Let me tell you about how I see the differences and the complementarity between Russia and ASEAN. ASEAN has gone in its history through a difficult period of colonialism and then getting over colonialism, during which it had to deal with partners, not partners, but masters, who were much stronger than any of these countries. And the formula of Thailand, the foreign policy formula of Thailand, the only country in Southeast Asia which was not conquered by colonial masters, tells you a lot about this attitude. Bend with the wind. In order not to be broken, adapt, but adapt in such a way as to stay what you are, with the possibility of later on getting into a straight position. Basically, it is, you can describe this kind of attitude by one word: flexibility. Sometimes extraordinary flexibility, but once again, which does not bring you into some kind of eternal submission, but which leaves you an opportunity to retain at least a minimum degree of independence and autonomy. Russia had its own colonial period under the what we call Tatar yoke. It was very long ago, and since that time, Russia always stood up, stood straight. I would say that Russia's major quality, well, if we forget periods when it goes into periodically into a serious crisis and then has to reconstruct itself, is its strong spine. Without a strong spine, you could never defeat Napoleon, Hitler, and you could never stand for much of the Cold War like we stood. And I think Russia maybe needs to learn from ASEAN a bit of the art of flexibility. And ASEAN has to learn from Russia the art of standing straight. From that point of view, I see lots of opportunities for mutual appreciation and for forming a rather harmonious relationship, especially if we take into account that we are far away from each other and none of us can be a menace or an adversary or present anything bad to the other. Then, Ilham, you asked me, by the way, let me introduce to you Ilham, who is the winner of the ASEAN-Russia essay contest, which ASEAN Center, together with the ASEAN Moscow Committee, organized a year ago for the students of our two countries. The prize for the ASEAN winners was a one-week trip to Moscow, and Ilham came and visited us and spent a brief one-week internship with the ASEAN Center. So that's why we know each other. Tell me once again, what was your question? I think in this field, the sky is the limit. Because, you know, we now have 1 million students, tourists in Thailand a year. And these people, when, you know, they are being interviewed about why they come to Thailand and why after being there one time they want to be back again, you know, they start to say how they are very much impressed by the caring and very elegant and tender attitude of the Thais and so on and so forth. They seem to instantly fall in love, not even, you know, with arts, but with the everyday culture, the traditional patterns of behavior of the people. I think the reactions to Russia of Southeast Asians are often very much the same, although here you need to talk about some other qualities. You know, when we talk about the bad aspects of today's international situation, one of the worst things, as far as, for instance, Russia-ASEAN linkages are concerned, we often talk about information gap as the problem which does not allow us to develop fully our cooperation potential. Sometimes you just have to see it with your own eyes and to get it, as they say, under your skin, to get over a lot of prejudices and stereotypes. In that sense, nothing had done a better service to Russia in the midst of all these lies and bad propaganda which is poured on Russia by international media today. Nothing has done a better job than the World Cup in soccer last year. Just two anecdotes. One is related to my very good Filipino friend who has been living in Moscow for more than 20 years, comes from a very good Filipino family, studied with kids who later became congressmen and senators and wealthy businessmen, and some of these kids, now grown-up people, came to Russia for the World Cup. Now, after 3 weeks of travels between cities where the soccer games were planned, they get together for a glass of beer and they tell him, you know, Americans lied to us about Russia. That's what they said. Another story where this phrase will reappear. A man in one of your neighboring countries, whom Ambassador Vorobyova knows well, and who has a long history of doing all sorts of business deals and and exciting humanitarian projects with Russia, comes to Moscow a week after the World Cup. And I say, oh, why didn't you come to experience it all? He says, I didn't come, but some of my friends came. I asked him, what did they tell you? He said, they told me that Americans lied to us about Russia. So this is, by the way, one interesting indication how sometimes, even without planning anything, you can get over the bad aspects of today's situation. I can tell you more stories about the subject, but let's stop here and leave more space for the questions.
Okay, thank you. We have one second round for 2 or 3. Gilang over here, and one in the middle. Fitri. All right, please start. Identify yourself to the audience.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Phillips. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gilang Kembara. I'm from Csis. Thank you, Dr. Sumsky, for your presentation. And I'd like to agree with the notion that you mentioned on troubled world. Where I think in the past several years where I've been in CSIS, I see that the adherence to rule-based order is eroding in the world, and that I do agree that ASEAN member states, Indonesia and also Russia, have the obligation to fill in the void that is otherwise left absent by some respected states that should be left nameless here. So, but I wanna point out that aside from the ASEAN's principles that you mentioned of inclusiveness and centrality, we also honor a principle of non-interference between ASEAN member states here. And I just would like to ask whether could you or anyone can justify whether Russia is in adherence of the same principle when it comes to foreign policy in light of its ever stronger relationship with ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. To press the button.
Ready? All right. Greetings. My name is Ramos. I'm a technopreneur. Actually, I have some experience with the Russia company and Russia product. Currently, I bring military software from France, and then I met 3-star general in Ministry of Defense. And then when I asked about his opinion about product of NATO, what do you think? Can Indonesia buy this product? And then he easily speak that no other country can interference us about our decision making for buying a product, a military product. For example, we buy Sukhoi, and Lockheed Martin from US cannot interference with us. And then my concern is I want to introduce more technology from Russia to Indonesia. I become a distributor for nanotechnologies, a chemical fluid I bought from Japan. It can do some restructuring metallurgical process. And then when I try to trace down the patent, the Japanese company is by 10 years ago patent from Russia. I checked with RAS patent, and then I really amazed with this kind of technology. And then when I discuss with some other entrepreneurs, we strongly agree that American company, Germany company, they're really good in doing marketing of technology, their products. So I would like to ask your opinion. How about Russia diplomatic activity in terms of bringing new technology to Indonesia, and then what's their strategy to do marketing in Indonesia? Thanks.
Thank you. Fitri?
Thank you for your talk. It's very enlightening and informative. Not everybody in this room has the privilege, like Ilham, that know more about Russia. And you actually already mentioned how there's a the lack of knowledge and difference of language that actually are the barrier of the understanding between ASEAN and Russia. And I want to know, how do you think that we can bridge it so we can foster a better understanding? Because ASEAN in itself is quite an elitist, relatively still a top-down kind of organization. How do you encourage people-to-people interaction, for example? And not everybody can go traveling to Moscow, of course. And the second, I want to know what's your, or Russia, if you can like represent Russia, opinion toward China and the rise of China. Does Russia always, what do you comment about it, and whether in this kind of troubled world, whether there's a position that, just like the US has Quad, whether, if I can say, China has Russia to back? Thank you.
Thank you. I think there are three tough questions for Dr. Sumsky to respond.
The first one was about, if I understood you correctly, you want to know whether we interfere into the domestic affairs of other nations. Yes, and if we do, and if we do, what I think about it. Of course, we are blamed for interferences, and if you need the latest examples, which are really abused by global media, Western media, these are probably the war episode in the Caucasus in 2008. That is the confrontation with Georgia. Then it is probably Ukraine and Crimea, and then it is Syria. Let us start with Syria, and with the simple fact that in Syria, until the Russian aerospace troops, as they're called, this is basically Air Force, came to Syria, the external interference was already there, and it was an unwanted external interference, and there was a variety of intrusions, but the most dangerous one was what we know as ISIS. And none of this was invited by the government of Syria, which, if you look at Syria in the context of the Middle East, was, by the time these events started, the only secular state in that part of the world. Or let's say the only state which was relying on secular nationalism as the official ideology. Russian coming to Syria was based on the direct invitation by the Assad government, which we considered the legitimate government of Syria, and from that point of view, it was an act of external assistance. It was not an intrusion, and it prevented in Syria the repetition of scenarios which we already and sadly know from the experience of Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, and other countries. Ukraine. You simply have to know that before the present stage of Ukrainian conflict, Americans were investing billions of dollars into attempts to tear away Ukraine from Russia. You have to, the closest parallel to Ukraine and Russia I can find in Indonesia is Sunda and Java. That's the degree of closeness between Russia and Ukraine, maybe even bigger. in fact, 150 or 200 years ago, writers and artists who are now classified by the Ukrainian government as Ukrainians were calling themselves Russians. Gogol, for instance. Well, I mean, you can go probably as far as to say that they represent both these nations. But you cannot say that it's one or the other. So Americans were trying to break down this cultural link. And the former Deputy Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, said openly that $5 billion were invested by the American government into that operation in the late 1990s and early in this century. So this was actually a quiet and sometimes not so quiet social coup. That's what it was before it became a political coup, which brought to the fore, I would say, the darkest forces, political forces in today's Europe. They are called fascists. They are called Nazis. The extreme Ukrainian nationalists, which are in conflict not just with Russia, but with practically all the other neighbors of Ukraine. That was actually the menace which Russia had to repulse in order, in Ukraine, apart from Ukrainians, you have a very significant Russian population. So what Russia is doing today in Ukraine and what it had done in Crimea was done to save these people from physical persecution and from what any decent humanitarian organization would call a genocide. By the way, you are familiar, I think, with the term humanitarian intervention. I think if there was a decent humanitarian intervention where no shots were fired and civilian population was preserved and no infrastructure was destroyed and nobody bombed anybody, that's Ukraine and Crimea. Well, let's say that's Crimea. Ukraine is different in the sense that there you have a physical assault on the two areas of the country, Donetsk and Lugansk, which decided to go independent, which I think they are fully entitled to you have the norm of territorial integrity, yes, but you also have the norm of national self-determination. They tried to go into national self-determination. They tried to do something that the Kosovars tried to do in the former Yugoslavia, which was absolutely blessed by the West because they played with them. Here you have a different situation and you have a different interpretation by the global media what's actually happening. Now we're proceeding to Georgia, which I named first. A very simple fact of life, which was not acknowledged right away when this crisis broke out, but which later was proved. The Georgians were the first to attack the Russian peacekeepers in southern Ossetia, after which there was no other way to save the local population and to protect our troopers than to go into a military confrontation with Georgia. So these are, in a nutshell, the stories of our military or non-military actions outside of the territory of Russian Federation, which from our side were not provoked. And these are the situations in which I think we didn't have any other choice but to do what we have done. I do not think you can. There is anything else to analyze in terms of Russia acting outside the realm of its national territory in the recent times. So we also have a question on
technology, how Russia
Technology. You are basically asking me to show you the way to the Russian exporters of technologies, some of which are not yet even put to work in Russia, but which can be productively put to work elsewhere. Well, I'm not going to cover the whole field, and I think, by the way, that Ambassador Vorobyova can do it much better, especially of course, I'm not a diplomat, but as director of ASEAN Center, we are trying to support some business interactions. Let me tell you this: lots of innovative technologies in Russia were developed and are still developed in the framework of our military-industrial complex, but they are what you may call dual purposes technologies. And there are a lot of them which are what you may call non-lethal. In other words, they may have military application, but not as weapons. The enterprises which are involved in it are given now the right to go into external economic interactions and operations to the point of localizing their production somewhere in the world, creating joint ventures and so on and so forth. This is absolutely legal. For instance, some medical devices are produced in this way and exported in this way. Let's do it like this. I will give you my card, and you tell me what you are interested in, and I will try to show you the way. Oh, yeah. We still have a very provocative question about China. Everybody now has this habit of saying that we need to talk about the elephant in the room. Okay. Seriously speaking, Russia and China had different periods in their relationship. When I was a child, or let's say a teenager, there was cultural revolution in China, and that was the moment of my beginning political maturity. And I was reading in newspapers the stories which were absolutely bizarre about the degree of radicalism displayed during that time by young people in China, about the strange economic policies and so on and so forth. This China is dramatically different from the China that we know today. And it's an interesting lesson to other nations about how things which are unthinkable and are absolutely unexpected can happen. I think that before saying anything else about China, we have to simply and humbly acknowledge that the achievement is extraordinary. We also have to acknowledge that, you know, with that kind of transformation and that kind of economic growth, you also have a transformation of mentality. And in some ways, these are natural and positive changes. Some of it may not look positive and welcome to the outside world. But in any today, China is going through a period, I think, when it has to think about one important fact. It is becoming a difficult partner to many partners with whom it cooperated before in a rather smooth way. Does Russia come into that category? I would say that the primary fact about Russia and China is that for the last 30 years, this relationship was developing steadily, and it was, in the final analysis, improving. And this was a bad surprise to those in the West who were consistently repeating that Russia and China can never make it together. They can, and it has gone now so far that Americans are finally starting to pay serious attention to it and to be apprehensive of it. But what can they do? They had themselves contributed a lot to Russia and China coming together. Look, for instance, at the policies of President Obama, who, through the Trans-Pacific Partnership Project, tried to cut China away from Asia, and through the Transatlantic Project, tried to cut Europe away from Russia. Russia and China simply had nothing else to do but to get closer together. And now they stand either face-to-face or back-to-back in such a way that as long as they keep that position, neither of them can be encircled, contained, isolated, and they understand the importance of maintaining that position. Having said that, I still have to remind myself and all of us that when you talk about the players of such magnitude, you can never hope that their interests will be completely the same. There will always be differences. And I think no other than President Putin said that the man who had done a lot to improve relations with China, that Chinese are difficult negotiation partners. Difficult. In spite of that fact, relations are progressing, and there are some problems related to the greater interaction in the framework of our big integration projects, the bigger Eurasia for Russia, the One Belt, One Road for China. But I think that eventually this will be solved in a way which will be acceptable to both his partners. To finish that brief description, let me say this. Today, as I see it, Russia and China and their relationship remain a major factor of stability in Asia. If you look at other relations, look at China, US, China, Japan, China, India, these are different stories. Or India, Pakistan. Pakistan is important here because Pakistan is a close ally of China. Of course, much of this is generated from the outside through external manipulations. But there were also many attempts to disrupt Russia-China relations. They have not worked so far. So I think that in the observable future, we have to take into account the Russia-China partnership as a positive factor in the developments in Asia and the world.
Thank you. I think we still have another round, but just for one short intervention or question. If no one, I have my privilege to ask a question. You mentioned that we are in a troubled world and nobody is happy. Russia is not happy with how the international politics works. China, similar. And certainly Donald Trump is not happy about everything. Now, how do you see then if all major powers are not happy with the international construct, what do we do? Is regional partnership become the alternative, or you are expect like ASEAN and you mentioned about Eurasian, ASEAN and others, or is it going to be constant effort for any country to prevail as one hegemon in the international order?
Well, let me start by saying that the situation, well, the magnitude of dissatisfaction is is quite extraordinary today. But basically, the situation in which nobody is happy with a particular turn of events or situations, it's the norm of history. When I was a student, we had to go, all of us in the Soviet Union, through courses and seminars like History of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Scientific Communism, Dialectic Materialism, and Historical Materialism. And through all these studies, we had to read the classics of Marxism-Leninism. Among the things I remembered until today is a short extract from a letter written by Friedrich Engels to a German Marxist whose name was Wedemeyer. They are discussing how history is made. And Engels says that history is a resultant of a great variety of different wills. Some people want to do it this way, others the other way, and so on and so forth. And then there is something that emerges as a sum of all that. And the result is something nobody expected to happen. This is the standard operation mode of history. So at least from that point of view, we have to be more or less calm about things being normal. But if we start to look how really it's operated, for instance, now that everybody is talking about Indo-Pacific, you may want to ask, what has happened to Asia-Pacific? Why this thing did not, I mean, it seemed to work. But why is it abandoned after working so well for quite a while? I have this story in a more elaborate and detailed form, but I will cut it away and I will tell you just the essential thing. United States was, of course, after the end of the previous Cold War, in a position to engineer and to launch the regional integration project in the Asia Pacific. And everybody wanted to play with them because they were the only hegemon. And they wanted to do it on the surface for everybody, but essentially for themselves. What has happened? This project eventually was overtaken by another force. And the major beneficiary of the Asia-Pacific project became China. Now, I think what Trump is doing in your and our part of the world, he is trying to destroy that configuration. And the Indo-Pacific thing is nothing but a regional disintegration project. It is designed to break up what went wrong in integration terms in the Asia-Pacific. Personally, I do not think it will work. I also understand that Indonesia's idea of Indo-Pacific is different from the one which is propagated by United States, just like India's idea is different too. But before it all plays out, lots of unpleasant and bad things will happen. So for Russia, the situation is easier because after the publication of the National Defense Strategy and the National Security Strategy and the Asia Reassurance Act, I mean, there is no way to look for Russia, to look at the Indo-Pacific scheme with a degree of ambivalence. Everything is pretty clear. It is designed against China and against Russia, and you cannot be a part of a construct which is essentially aimed against you. It is a bit of a problem for countries like Indonesia and India because they may have their own ideas about how to reconfigure themselves in a changing world and how to elevate themselves to a higher international position from where they are today. But the scenario may turn out, the real scenario may turn out differently. So I think it's important to remember that.
Dr. Sumsky, please give a round of applause for very enlightening discussion that we have. And then for those of you who for the first time come to this lecture series, it is designed to add up to our understanding of international politics. So we invite a lot of speakers before, coming from different countries, India, United States, China, and other countries. And those of you who are interested to becoming part of this lecture series, please do not forget to sign up in the front desk and give us your email so you'll be in our list. Now, thank you once again for Dr. Sumsky who is agreeing to discuss his opinion about the topic that we are discussing. One thing that I learned is that, I mean, for our purpose of the discussion, as far as the ASEAN and Russia strategic partnership is concerned, number one, I think we should continue to operate in the mode of inclusion and autonomy to foster more cooperation between our part of the world. Number two, and I think this is very eloquently said by Dr. Sumsky, what we can learn from each other is that ASEAN may want to learn from Russia how to be standing straight, while Russia may want to learn from Southeast Asia how to be more flexible. I don't know whether the last part is the compliment for Southeast Asia, whether we are too flexible, so that we need to learn how to stand straight. But I think there are some degrees of understanding about how ASEAN actually works. Sometimes it's flexible, sometimes it's very stiff, so that we can move, or we cannot move. And with this ASEAN-Russia strategic partnership, I think we do hope that it will work well for the benefit of the people of our two parts of the world. Thank you once again.
Terima kasih banyak Pak Phillips atas undangan ini. Saya sangat senang berbicara di sini dan saya harap bisa kembali. Terima kasih.